Welcome back to Eagle Eye Builds, or maybe this is your first time here. Thanks for joining. Today I'm going to walk you through part 2 of my garage to shop video collection. I'm going to walk you through my workbench here. I had an old workbench made of 2x4s, and just kind of walk you through how I transformed it into, I think, a much nicer, more stable, and more useful actual workbench. So I'm going to go through my drawer construction. I will show you how I made my drawers. Did them all out of plywood. There are no drawer slides at all. And just kind of the basic construction of my cabinets are pretty simple. And a little bit about the top itself. It was already existing, my kind of like a torsion table construction with an actual solid particle board laminate top. This is one option you can do for your fronts, just straight plywood. I kind of try to keep them even for the cabinet and then cut them to width. For example, I did drawers for all these, and all the drawers are actually made of just plywood. 3/4 inch plywood I use for everything, drawer slides, runners, everything. So it keeps it pretty simple, keeps the cost down. As you know, slides can be pretty expensive, so trying to keep it neat. So I'll walk you through the construction of this. Again, 3/4 inch material all the way around. Again, I used pocket holes on the back and on the front of the drawers. Now, I always do them on the outsides of the drawer box because when we put a front on it, you're never going to see it. Again, it's pretty simple construction. You can see I do an overhang here. That's the runner itself. And on the bottom, it's just a basic plywood construction with, I just screwed it in, flushed and mounted them, so that way they're out of the way and don't interfere with anything else. Again, it's pretty simple construction. I've seen a couple different woodworkers out there doing this style. You do use a little bit more plywood, but at the end of the day, you're not spending all that money and hundreds of dollars on slides if you want them. They are nice, don't get me wrong. So this is what the inside of the cabinet looks like. I have actually, again, it's just a simple box. All the boxes are exactly the same for the whole workbench. And then the configuration changes. So for example, this one has 2 of the larger drawers on the front side of my workbench. All I've done is taken some strips of 3/4 inch plywood, same plywood everything else is made out of, and did a space in there just a little bit bigger that the plywood itself will just barely fit in there. A little bit of wiggle room, so you have some room in there, but that way the drawer actually slides in and out. For the bottom drawer, I did use this little smaller piece in there because I wanted to keep that clearance down as low as possible, and then matter putting the fronts on. My theory is that drawers are probably more efficient, but sometimes you do need some cabinet space. So I did a pretty simple cabinet here with just one shelf in there. I do have some shelf pins. I can always add more of those. I've used a Craig jig to make those pinholes. But pretty simple. Again, tried to keep the plywood look nice and fairly consistent, even though it's the back side of the workbench that probably not many people really see. On the side, you can see here where, as I built it, it is actually 2 different cabinets back to back. I had the plywood to do it, so I actually made 6 individual cabinets for the whole workbench itself. So it kind of gave it was easy to do by myself, easier to manage. And then I put it on a 2x4 frame, which is kind of dirty under there, but there's 4 casters. So I needed the corners. So I kind of inset in there to get a little lower profile and just make it look a little nicer. And then around the front, I did all drawers in the front. So I did a bank of 3 and then 2 banks of 2. I did some smaller drawers, obviously, with the 3, and then some bigger drawers. One thing I need, there's a lot of storage in here, so I want to make sure I had big enough drawers to put big enough stuff in, but not too big where you just come to catch-all and get covered with a bunch of garbage. But I did a little fancier here. I did a plywood pattern for it. It's actually on the end grain of the plywood. I'll talk about that a little bit more here in a second to try to show you how I did that. Just kind of give you an idea. It's not as complicated as it looks. Just does take a little bit of time and planning. So as far as the drawers, same as on the back side. Again, plywood construction, 3/4 inch. All the drawers and slides are actually the 3/4 material. And the fronts I made a little bit thicker than the others just because I want to make sure I have plenty of material when I made that pattern. So pretty simple drawers. That's one of the smaller ones. And then this is the larger one. Again, not too deep, but it is pretty deep that if you don't put big things in it, you can lose stuff in it for sure. I'm going to walk you through how I did my front side of my workbench with the pattern plywood. So it's technically what they call a herringbone design. It's all the end grain of the plywood. So how you get there is you want to cut yourself some even strips, all the same width and the same thickness. And the trick I find to get the best yield out of your material is you want to offset it. So what I typically do is I do a small offset, which equals about a 45°. Typically what I use is the thickness of the material I'm using. I use that as a spacer off. That'll give you roughly a 45° angle. And then you glue them up that way. Glue up a whole blank as much as you can. Typically I'll use, I've used a jig in the past that I've made out of 45 that I put the blank on to get that nice 45° cut. So when I have the material up on there, I can actually get that nice 45 for the first cut. Sometimes that'll work fine. You also use like your miter gauge, depending on how big it is. Sometimes they're pretty small. I have a nice one that I got from Harbor Freight. I'll link that in the description. But that seems to work really nice to get that first cut of the 45. Once you get that first cut, the 45, then it's a matter of figuring out how wide you want your pattern to be. For example, here, this is the actual blank itself. So you can see the plywood's going in that direction. So it's kind of like doing a pattern cutting board for myself. I've done this before where you just then figure out your width and then you start cutting them in strips. And you can set your fence up and just keep running along and evenly cut them in the same consistent width. I believe these are about 1.5 inches. And then once you get that, then it's just a matter of just staggering the pattern back and forth, which then you get here. So where you have the pattern going both ways and then gluing that up. Once that's done, you'll get a nice big blank like this. That's what this will look like. That's why it's uneven here as it goes through. One thing you want to watch out for though is some of your plywood. You do want to have a pretty good quality plywood so that there's a lot less voids in the actual layers of the plywood itself. This is pretty decent plywood here. You can see there's a couple defects here, but for the most part it was really easy to work with. Once you get those built, it's just basically a blank slate, but then you can cut your blank out of it for your drawer. So like this is the actual front itself that I had that was my top drawer. It's small. I did get lucky when I put it all together and had all of the actual grain going the same direction. I did take my time and think through that. So you do have to think about that. So as far as the top itself, the construction of that is actually, I bought this at a home center. It's a scrap piece I have. It comes 4x8 sheet. And it's just particle board, it's 3/4 inch plywood, and it has like a laminate type of high pressure laminate on top and bottom. So as you can see, the edges are kind of rough. So you want to make sure you can't use the whole sheet. If you're trying to do a workbench that's 4x8, you're not going to have very clean edges. So what I did for that is so I could clean it up, I cut it all around, made nice smooth. And then I had some salvaged white oak that I had around, and I used that and cut those into strips, same thickness as the rest of the top, and then I actually I glued those on and then just pin nailed them all the way around. The nice thing about the hardwood, it's going to protect this particle board and all the edges. I did make it just a hair proud on the top side, just so less chance for me to actually chip those edges. But it does give me a nice lip now. I can use it for clamping, that type of thing if I'm doing any work on the workbench. Here's the inside of my workbench torsion table. It's pretty simple construction. For example, the thickness of the frame all the way around is just about 1/2 inch plywood. That's what I had sitting around when I originally made it, probably 5 years ago or so. And then it's all sitting on a piece of another piece of 1/2 inch plywood that I had that was already attached to all this. This whole assembly was already attached to my old workbench. So I was able to just disconnect it from my old workbench and then reinstall it on my new workbench with the full cabinets. Again, plywood here, and there's also plywood on top that the actual particle board top is actually sitting onto. And everything's screwed from underneath. I used a 90-degree tool to screw everything down every 10 to 12 inches or so, all the way around, so it keeps it nice and flush. So here's a walk around of what that looks like all together. Again, it's like a torsion box, not completely, but I do have some storage on both ends that go all the way through on both ends. And then in the middle, you can only access one side or the other when you're looking through there. Then, like I said, it's particle board. I made it a really flat top with that particle board with this type of top design. And again, it went around with hard white oak around the edges to protect that particle board. Why don't you give you a final walk around of everything I've done. Noticed on this end here, I did add some metal pieces here. I get some of these magnetic tool holders for hardware. Works really great. Great place to put them out of the way. I have floor mats all the way around. I got all these at Harbor Freight. I suggest you get some type of stress mats. Makes a big difference if you're out here for endless hours sanding, as a lot of us do. Makes a big difference. But again, pretty simple. Again, it's 6 different cabinets all the way around. Pretty basic construction, I feel, but it really functions well, and you can really dress it up nice with the pattern plywood. So that's part 2 of the garage to shop videos. Again, I wanted to walk people through my workbench. I apologize I didn't have any real footage of me actually building the cabinets, the drawers, but I will work on that. If leave me a comment in below if you want to see some of that. I'm happy to walk you through that and actually build a couple drawers so everyone can see how that's done. But again, I appreciate everybody's support. Continued support would be great. If you'd like, subscribe, send me a comment. I will try to get back to you as quick as I can. Be great. But again, thanks for everybody watching, and have a great day, guys.